A retired elementary school teacher who was once highly regarded by his peers is now accused of sexually abusing more than 50 former students spanning over decades. Thomas Bernagozzi was arrested on December 21st, and despite more than 50 former students coming forward, he's only charged with one count of first-degree coarse sexual conduct against a child and another first-degree count of sodomy. Prosecutors say during the course of Bernagozzi's tenure, the now 76-year-old was once revered by teachers, staff, and parents within the district who would specifically request their children, mainly young boys, be placed in his class. The state says because a look-back window created in the New York State Child Victims Act allowed victims to file civil claims against alleged abusers, 45 individual lawsuits were filed against the Bayshore Union Free School District and Thomas Bernagozzi. And since those lawsuits were filed, 11 more alleged victims have come forward, tacking the number up to 56 alleged victims.
It's become all too common to hear about some type of sexual abuse that goes on, whether it be at a school, whether it be at a church.
I spoke with Law&Crime legal analyst Julie Rendelman, who tells me the allegations against Bernagozzi and the school district are troubling.
And what is all the more troubling, keeping in mind that these are only allegations, is that the behavior, if true, seemed to have gone on for so many years and kind of swept under the rug potentially by the school itself. I think that we live in a very different time than we did years ago. I think many things that occurred were swept under the rug. I think school administration is much more attentive. I think there's much more of a risk, keep in mind now, that you're going to be held accountable, whether or not you're the person who's committing the crime or you're the administration that's ignoring the crime. So as time has changed, I think we're starting to see it a little less. But unfortunately, there was a period of time where we kind of shut our eyes, put our heads in the sand, and made pretend that things weren't happening when they really were.
Prosecutors say they were only able to criminally prosecute 2 cases. One of the victims alleges Bernagozzi abused them between 1997 and 2000. The other victim was allegedly abused by the former teacher between 1989 and 1991. So how does a once revered teacher continue a pattern of alleged sexual abuse over the course of 3 decades? The state says the former educator took students to local gyms, to the beach, the pool, Broadway shows, sporting events, and photos of hundreds of students were found inside his home. One victim who filed one of the 45 civil lawsuits says Bernagozzi abused him back in 1976 and would fondle him in the classroom and at baseball games. Prosecutors reportedly alleged in court that school district officials knew about the abuse and even turned a blind eye.
Look, anytime you have a teacher taking 4 to 8-year-olds to baseball games, to taking them to events that are outside the school, you have to be aware and more cognizant as a school to make sure that the behavior is as it should be.
The Bayshore School District in turn released a statement writing in part, the former employee hasn't been affiliated with the district since 2000, and due to pending and ongoing litigation, the Bayshore School District is unable to comment regarding the matter.
Look, I think we've learned a lot over the past years in regards to what occurred in the churches for all those years where no one did a single thing. And schools, whether they be colleges or private schools or public schools. And so a school at this stage would be fools to not have an investigative process in place that guarantees that when an incident is brought to their attention, it's investigated and it's investigated thoroughly.
But a recent law passed more than 15 years after Bernagozzi resigned as a teacher is providing New York sexual abuse survivors a new path to seek justice, even if the statute of limitations has run out.
New York, along with many other states, have statute of limitations as to when an individual can be charged with an actual crime. Civil is a bit different, and New York had a Child Victim Act that was put into place that allowed a look back for certain cases that went back much further, but that was for civil liability. Criminal liability is much different. And so in this case, the prosecutors could only bring charges on those cases that were recent enough that they could fall within the statute of limitations. The Child Victim Act opened the door for many, many, many more civil suits, and that allowed for individuals to come forward that had really had no avenue before. Now, keep in mind, I have to say this again, these are allegations. So while there are plenty of individuals that have a basis for coming forward, there are also some that we must accept come forward who are making allegations that potentially are false. But either way, it gives an avenue for individuals to come forward for incidents that happened years and years in the past.
So, what about the school district in this case? Could they face legal ramifications? As Rendleman explains, it's on the table.
Now, keep in mind, an individual can sue the person who is alleged to have committed the crimes. They can also sue the school if there's evidence that the school either knew or should have known about the actions of one of their own teachers and failed to act. So there are avenues with regards to civil liability. The criminal liability does become more limited as time goes on. Is it possible that these children came forward all those years ago and were ignored or not taken seriously? Absolutely. Keep in mind, the majority of the children were from 4 years old to 8 years old. In a criminal case, they're arguably not even swearable. And so it is possible that someone did come forward and was ignored, or someone expressed them that they misinterpreted what was happening. I think a school wants to have an environment where children and staff are able to come forward and not feel judged if they do come forward. With that said, keep in mind, not every single time a child or a teacher or someone that works in a school capacity, when they come forward, are telling the truth. And so you have to have something in place that allows an investigation to occur when an allegation occurs. To have a better understanding of whether something happened to prevent it from happening in the future.
And for the defendant, Rendleman says it's possible he could spend hard time behind bars.
Sure. So Bernagozzi is facing up to 25 years for each of the crimes of which he's alleged. And he can be looking at concurrent time where they run together, or consecutive time where they run separately. Also, remember, he's looking at registration as a sex offender. I believe he's 76 years old, so any type of sentence would potentially be a life sentence. In terms of civil liability, they can certainly go after his finances, and they can go after the school. It can cost the school quite a lot if they lose or if they don't come to an amicable settlement. One would expect there is a civil attorney or attorneys that are handling the civil aspect of this case. And even when you look up uh, this specific case, you actually see at the bottom that they're looking for additional victims. They want people to come forward, whether it be for more criminal charges or potentially to hold the school and this defendant potentially civilly liable for whatever acts they committed in the past. So I think the only thing that I think is interesting is you have to realize that the individuals that are coming forward now are adults. And so they're speaking about events that happened years ago when they were very, very young, some 4 years old, some 5, 6, 7, 8. And one of the things that the defense attorneys are going to be going after is their ability to recall really what occurred. Is it something they're really remembering? Is it something that they think happened and then over the years it developed as something they believed was a real memory? I also think it's going to be important in terms of finding out what corroboration there was, not just now, but back then. Did they go to someone? Did they tell their mother? Did they tell someone at the school? And can that person come forward? Because I think these things are going to be important in being able to prove that he is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
In December, New York prosecutors requested Bernagozzi be held on a $1 million cash bail. However, a New York judge ordered Bernagozzi be placed on supervised release with GPS conditions. Court records reveal Bernagozzi is scheduled to appear in court again on March 19th. If convicted, he faces up to 25 years in prison on each count. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.